Hello and welcome to the Did You Know tutorial. So what we're going to consider here are various functions in the program that you may not be aware that you can use. Let's first of all start with some basic ones. So did you know that you can color code your patients and your appointments by patient group? Now if you want to do that, you can go to File and Practice Settings in the top left hand corner, and under the Miscellaneous tab there is a setting to use patient group color coding. Now what does that do? Well, if we open an appointment, you can see that generally as the default we have just like a light blue or lilac color across the top of every appointment. Also when you open up a patient, there's just that lilac color across the top of the patient. It doesn't matter what group they belong to, that color always remains the same. But you may have noticed when you're setting up your patient groups that you can assign colors to these different groups. So here we have a Denplan in a kind of orange, NHS as blue, and private as green. So if we color code our patients and our appointments, then we will be able to see instantly by the color on the header exactly which group these patients and these appointments belong to. So if I just turn that on and press OK, now notice when I double click on this appointment, because Mark Cross belongs to a private group, he's being shown in green. Likewise, if I was to open up the patient record, immediately I can see that the color coding is green. So I know from my own personal choice that the patient is a private patient. You can notice as I change the patient group for Denplan, it changes the color of my patient header. NHS in blue and private in green. So if you want to use patient code color coding, File, Practice Setup, and just make that change under the Miscellaneous tab. Just tick the box there. Now something else we can do in here is specify mandatory program fields. So it may be that when your staff are setting up patient records, that you want certain elements of that patient record to be mandatory. For example, if I open up a patient record here, it may be that we always want a default provider to be chosen for the dentist and for the hygienist. Let's say that we remove those two fields and they're completely blank. I can save and close, and notice because I have no mandatory fields, I can do that. But if I go to the File, Practice Settings, Miscellaneous tab, and click on my Specify Mandatory Program Fields, I can make sure that whoever is entering a new patient is forced to enter any of these details. It's not just the patient record that's affected, we can do the same with appointments. So if we always want to make sure that an appointment category is entered or a treatment category is entered into the appointment, again we can tick these fields and the user will not be able then to create an appointment or a patient unless they have entered those details. Likewise, on a payment, we can make the payment reference field mandatory just by ticking that box, and then it won't allow the payment to be taken unless a payment reference has been entered. So let's say in this instance that we want to force our users, our staff members, to always enter a patient group and always enter a default dentist as an example. If I then OK that, now whenever I go into a patient record, let's say I'm creating a new patient record, let's say that they don't have a patient group, for example, and they don't have a standard dentist. Notice when I save, it tells us that the following fields have been designated as mandatory by your practice. So you must enter the dentist and the patient group. So let's enter the patient group, and again if I try to save, it's telling me I don't have a default dentist, so I have to enter a dentist before I can save the patient record. So that's specifying mandatory fields in the program. Now when you open up a patient record, Probably notice that you have numerous tabs along the top here: contact, patient, charting, perio, den plan, etc. There's all these different tabs, and it may be that you don't use a lot of them. There's no point in them being there. Or maybe you want to reorder the order in which the tabs are being shown. Well, if you want to do that for just yourself, then just simply click on My Settings at the top of the screen and go to Configure Patient Tabs. So here are the tabs that we would normally see in the patient record, and this is the standard view. But let's say, for example, that we're not doing den plan. We don't want to see that particular tab. Let's say also that we're not doing referrals and we're not doing patient education tutorials, so we don't need those ones either. So if I just untick those and OK, notice now when I open up my patient record that those tabs have disappeared. Now I just have the ones that I want to work with. Let's say as well that we're a dentist and we're not really interested in the contact details or these other details. We want to go straight to our charting tab whenever we open up the patient record. Well, if that's the case, back to My Settings, Configure Patient Tabs, and where the charting tab is, at the moment it's the third one down, so you can use these up and down arrow keys to move the tabs to where we want them to go. So let's say we want charting first. OK. Open up the patient record, and now as soon as we open up the patient record it brings us straight to the charting screen. No need to click on charting in order to get to that tab. If you ever want to restore them back to their defaults, then we can just go back in and press reset, and that will reset everything back to our standard. So that's configuring patient tabs. Did you know that you can automatically put your signature onto any documents that you want to create, any letter templates that you want to create? So some documents, for example, not only will require a patient signature, but you'll also want a provider signature on those documents as well. Now, in order to do that, if we go to Staff Members and double click on our provider name, then under the Miscellaneous tab we can enter a provider signature. All we do is take an image of our signature, so sign something, do a scan of that signature, try to make sure it's in a decent high resolution, and then we can simply browse to that image file that we have. So here we have a signature file that I did earlier. So there's my signature, and I can save and close that. And now if I go to Documents here and into my word processor, I'm going to open up one of my letter templates, and let's try a quick document. So here you can see I've just entered some text into my quick document. This document requires the signature of both the patient and the provider. So as normal, on the left hand side we can enter the patient signature where we want it to go if we're using a signature pad or if we're using the tablet in order to capture a patient's signature. But also at the bottom here we have a provider signature which we can insert wherever we want it to go onto our document. So now that I've done that, if I go to my patient and I create a quick document, notice it has automatically entered my provider signature onto my document. Then we can capture the patient's signature as they sit in the chair. So that's inserting a personal signature onto our document. Some other functionality. Let's look at setting the description of an appointment. Now, normally on an appointment we would have the patient code, their name, maybe their the group that they belong to, and some contact details. But you can actually change what you see in that appointment description and even reorder how you view that description. So if I go into any appointment, notice here's my description, but at the bottom of that description box I have a set description format. And notice I have various fields ticked here. Again, this is similar to earlier where we can reorder our description by simply clicking on it and then by moving things up or down as to where we want to see them in the description. So let's say, for example, we're not really interested in seeing the patient code in our description, but we do want their name and we do want their date of birth in the description. We also want the treatment, the patient group, and all these other details. So if I OK that, now when I save an appointment, notice what it will do to our description. It has now removed the code because we didn't want it, and it has inserted our date of birth because that's what we selected that we wanted. Likewise, as I said, you can move things around. So if we wanted our date of birth, for example, to appear before the name, we can just move it up, OK, and now when we save, it will automatically put our description in the order that we've selected it. So that's creating the description of our appointment. Now normally this is the view on the diary that we would have. It's called the day view. So in order for me to move throughout my diary for the week, I would normally just click on the day so that I could see the appointments I have on any particular day. But if you want to see the whole working week, you can go to your diary settings in the top right hand corner, and instead of it being in day view, we can adjust this to our working week view. That will immediately show me all the days that I'm working during the following week. So here I can see Monday the 1st, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. So I can see every appointment I have throughout my whole week. So this works well if you're just looking at a single provider. Obviously when you're looking at multiple providers, it will also try to insert them so we can see the working week of all of those individuals that we tick. But it can get a bit cramped on the appointment diary if we're doing that. So normally it's useful if you're looking at your own diary and you just want to see the whole week ahead of you, then you can change that to a working week. And then back to day view if we want to put it back into the day view. Something else we can do. Let's say, for example, you've got multiple patient records for the same person. So somebody has accidentally created the same patient twice, and you want to be able to merge those two records together. So let's say, for example, notice down here we have James Smith, and he's been entered twice. Got the same date of birth, same name. And it may be that this individual has been seen by different dentists or by the same dentist, and they've got the patient record has been updated. You can see we've got an examination for that one. And let's see what we have in the second patient record. Yep, you can see we've got some crown details in here for another appointment. So this is a bit of a problem. We obviously have multiple entries for the same person. So we want to be able to merge those two records together. So what we would do in this instance is we need to choose the patient record which is the primary and the one that we want to merge into. So let's say we want to keep 00006 and we want to merge in the record 920. Now to do that, we go to our patients area, and then in the menu at the top we select patients and merge patient records. So it will ask us who is our primary patient. So in this case, as we said, we'll make it this one, 0006, which is James Smith. And who is the secondary patient? Well, we'll merge in our final patient, which was James Smith at the bottom here, 920. So there's our two James Smiths. Merge. The program is about to merge these two patient records, after which the second patient will be deleted and only the primary patient will exist. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. So now it's going through and it's merging all of the tables, all of the data from one patient record into the other. Now patient record 920 has been removed, but if we go to patient 0006, notice in our charting it has merged all of our data together, including the exam and our crown, etc. So, and everything else, their appointment history, their accounts, everything will be merged into the single patient record. So that's merging patients together when we have multiple ones for the same patient in the system. Another useful function is the grid. Very basic, but whenever you click on contacts or staff members or on the patients, we're met with these grids. Now we can filter these grids and adjust them to however we want to view them. So for example, if we want to order the grid in a certain way, then we can do that by just clicking on the column header. So here we can see we've got everything ordered in code order because I've clicked on the code at the top. If you click on it once, it will order it as in ascending mode. If you click on it twice, it'll do everything in descending. If you want to order it by last name, then we can just click on the column header at the top, and then everything is ordered by the last name. But we can go further. You can see in here I've got 50 records. But it might be that we want to filter our patient records very easily. We can do this through reporting and things like that, but if we can do it on the grid, then so much the better. It's nice and simple and very quick. So if I want to filter my grid, I can go to Show Grid Settings on the right. And notice I have a filter row that I can tick. So if I display the filter row, that brings in this blank row at the top of the screen. So using the filter row, I can very quickly filter based on any of these fields. So let's say, for example, I want to just see all of the women that are at the clinic. So we've got 50 records in total, but if I type in here, you can see below it we have male and female. If I was to type in female in my box and hit enter, I would just see all of the women at the clinic. I have 16. And then likewise, if I was to replace that with male, I can see all of the men. I've got 34. So in order to reset our grid, we can just click on the empty filter next to that field, and it will then bring us back to our standard view. Now notice as I look at my patients, I can see I've got some that have got red lines through. They're in red. That means that they're inactive. So although it says I've got 50 patient records, maybe I just want to see our active patients. Well, if that's the case, I can move along to whatever column is appropriate. In this case, let's go to the active field at the end here. And if I go into there and I tick this box and press the enter button, now it's just showing me my active patients. And you can see I've only got 46 active patients. Likewise, if I wanted to see the inactive ones, I can untick it, press enter, and that would just show me my inactive patients. Let's reset it. So that's using the grid. Very simple and a very easy way in order to filter your patient details. Let's go back to our diary. Sometimes we will be receiving patient SMS responses, and as you know, on reception you will get a ringing phone icon at the bottom of the diary, and when we click on it, it will show us the response that we've had from any SMSs that we've sent to our patients. But if you've missed that, maybe somebody else has clicked on it and you didn't see what the response was of our patient, maybe even throughout the day. Maybe we want to check on all of the SMS responses we've received throughout the day. If that's the case, we can always do that by clicking on SMS at the top of the screen. And under our View and Process SMS Messages, we can instantly see any responses that have been received today. So you can see here, at the moment we've only had this one response from Sheila McMahon. As I click on that, it will show me the details on the right hand side in our phone. Likewise, if we want to see further back, we can check the last 3 days, the last 7 days, the last month, or even all replies. So it will show us everything in our responses. So that's a quick way of just checking any responses that we've had. Likewise, if you just want to filter on here, then we can just enter anyone that we want to. So let's say we were expecting a response from James Smith. We could type in Smith into here, hit the enter button, and we can see we haven't had any responses from any Smiths today. But we have had a response from Sheila McMahon. So that's a quick way of filtering and being able to see any responses that you've had from your patients. Now, another useful feature in the program is the bookmarking feature. This is often missed, but it's an icon in the top right of many of the dialogues that you see within the program. If I open up an appointment, for example, notice I've got this icon in the top right. These are bookmarking icons. And anywhere you see a bookmarking icon, you can press on it and it will add a specific bookmark for that entry, whatever we happen to be viewing, so that we can return to it later on. So if there was a particular appointment that for some reason you wanted to be reminded of and you wanted to come back to, then you could simply click on the bookmarking icon in the top right. It would ask us whether we want to add a comment to our bookmark. Say no in this instance, and then it says that a bookmark has been added. Likewise, if for some reason we want to be reminded to come back to a particular patient record, maybe we're a provider and we don't have time to do the clinical notes for a particular patient in that session, we need to be reminded that we want to come back to this patient record and fill in our clinical notes at the end of the day or maybe tomorrow. So when we're in the patient record, notice again we have our bookmark in the top right. So if I click on that, would you like to add a comment to your bookmark? Say yes. Let's just say clinical notes required. Okay, that again is added a bookmark. So now we could carry on throughout the day, we could do whatever we wanted, then at the end of the day we can check our bookmarks by clicking on bookmark in the menu at the top of the screen. If I do that, notice it will show me any bookmarks that I've got. I've got an appointment related bookmark here and a patient related bookmark here, clinical notes required. And notice as I double click on any of these bookmarks, it will immediately take me to whatever I've bookmarked. If I double click on the appointment one, it immediately opens up our appointment. Likewise, if I was to click on my patient bookmark, notice I've got it to automatically delete bookmarks after use. So once I've seen a patient or I've double clicked on my bookmark, I can get it to automatically remove these bookmarks as I'm processing them. So in this case, clinical notes required, double click and it will immediately take me back to whatever I bookmarked, in this case the patient Mark Cross, where I can enter the clinical notes, save and close, and that's it, job done. Because I've clicked on that bookmark, it's now removed from my bookmark section. So let's now look at something else that we can do in the patient record. That's under charting. So if I go to my charting section, now normally we'd be presented in the grid at the bottom with whether we've completed a treatment, the date that we completed it, the provider, the code, the description, etc. And the default value in our patient record is that our clinical notes are stored separately from our treatments. But you can configure this to work how you want to work. So let's say, for example, that we want to be able to see our clinical notes not in a separate tab, but also under the treatment that we did the clinical note. If we want to do that, then we can click on Settings at the bottom of the screen here. And we have these options to view clinical notes in the Treatments tab. But let's say we just want to view treatment-specific notes below our treatment. So if I tick that box and OK, it says I need to close down the patient record and reopen it in order to reconfigure. So let's do that. Now notice when I click on a particular treatment, let's say an examination, I've got the facility to add a clinical note directly to the treatment. So instead of having to go to the Clinical Notes tab, I can just click on my treatment and select Add Clinical Note. And then I'm able to add whatever clinical note I want to. I seem determined to spell that word wrong. This is my clinical note, and if I OK that, notice that my clinical note now appears directly beneath my treatment. It also appears under the Clinical Notes tab, of course, as a separate entity, but if I want to see those clinical notes in with my treatments, then just click on Settings, and then View Treatment-Specific Clinical Notes below my treatment. What if, rather than having to click on clinical notes on the top there, you want to be able to see all of your clinical notes in the same grid as your treatments? Again, we can do that. Settings, View Clinical Notes in the Treatment tab. If I tick that top one and OK, again, we just need to close down the patient record to reconfigure it and reopen it. Only need to do that once. And now notice I not only have my clinical notes beneath my treatment, but I can see all of my clinical notes straight away on the right hand side. And I can just double click those to enter and change any clinical notes that I want. Again, this is possible because I have a decent screen resolution. So obviously if I had a small screen resolution, it would be difficult to squeeze all this information in and see the clinical notes on the right hand side. So this is an optional thing that you can do if you've got a big enough screen. So I'm going to turn that off for the moment. It may also be that you want to reorder the columns. So at the moment, as I said, we've got our completed, whether the date here, our tooth at the very end, the description. But let's say we want to see the tooth that something applies to right at the beginning, in front of the date maybe. Then again, we can click on Settings, and we're met with this same functionality that we saw earlier. So if we don't want to see a particular field, either in our treatment grid or in our clinical notes grid, then we can just untick that particular item. So if we didn't want to see, for example, the code of the treatment, we can untick that. And let's say we wanted to see the tooth in front of the provider and in front of the description. I can OK, and now again, because I've reconfigured it, I just need to come out of the patient record and it will remember what I've done for the future. But now notice I've got my date, and then straight after that I've got the tooth that the treatment applies to, and then the provider, and then the description, and then the NHS flag and the price. So again, we can just order these and adjust these however we want for our own personal use. So this only applies to the currently logged in person. It's only going to apply to me. It won't affect any of the other providers. Something else we can do in the charting, which you may not be aware of, is filtering treatments. So you can see here we've got multiple treatments applying to multiple different teeth. But if, for example, I want to see just treatments in my grid at the bottom here that apply to a specific tooth, then if I right click on a particular treatment, obviously we have this ability just to hover over something and it immediately shows us everything that's happened to that tooth. But if we wanted to filter our charting down the bottom here by a particular tooth, we can just right click on that tooth and select filter by treatments applying to this tooth. So you can see it's filtering treatments that apply to lower left 3. And now as I look through my courses of treatment, it's only showing me those treatments that apply to that particular tooth. And we can do this with any of the teeth that we have currently on display. In order to unfilter, we simply click on the unfilter icon at the top here. And now that brings back all of our treatments once again. Finally, let's look at visual notes. Now, quite often when we visit the visual notes and add a note, you'll probably know that we have the ability to choose from various templates so that we can perform soft tissue exams and things like that. But did you know you can also draw on your own images that you may have taken, maybe an X-ray? Let's say, for example, we go to our documents area and we add in an X-ray for this particular patient. So here's an X-ray that we took earlier. So that's now in my system as an X-ray for the patient. But let's say we want to highlight certain points on that particular X-ray that we've taken. Now often you can do this in the digital X-ray software that you have installed, but you can also do it within the Bridget program if you want to, and that X-ray is stored within the program. So now I can go to my visual notes, and when I add a note, instead of choosing from the standard templates, I can view any images that I may have taken in the patient documents images drop down box. So for example, if I was to select my X-ray, you can see it immediately brings up the image, and now I can use these different drawing facilities, whether it be lines, squiggly lines, straight lines, boxes, circles, perhaps highlighting certain points on the image with an X, or even typing in text. We can do all of this just by selecting the relevant box, and then we can choose a color. So let's say, for example, I wanted to highlight a particular item on our image. Then I can either choose here, you can notice if I press an X and then I just select on there, it will immediately put an X there. Or if I wanted to draw an ellipsis, I can do so just by selecting and then highlighting a particular point on our image. If at any point we want to clear it, we can do so, and then just redraw whatever we want to on our image. And then we can save and close that. And in the future, of course, whenever we double click on it, we have our image, but we also have the highlight that we might have made, or any particular note that we might have made on our image. So those are just some basic functions that often get missed in the Bridget software. So hopefully that's given you some pointers as to how to use these functions better.